Israel's army has confirmed it has deliberately hit the largest refugee camp in Gaza. They've justified it by saying the strike killed a key Hamas commander, but, of course, this strike has killed dozens more. Joining me live to discuss this he's on the Council of Foreign Relations. He's a senior fellow. His name is David Scheffer. He served as the first ever US ambassador at large for war crimes issues. David, welcome to the program. Before I ask my first question, I just want to take our viewers through your back catalogue here and your CV, because it's important to give it to some context. You led the US delegation to the UN talks establishing the ICC. David also signed the Rome Statute of the ICC on behalf of the US. He negotiated the creation of 5 war crimes tribunals, including the International Criminal Tribunals for former Yugoslavia and Rwanda. And of course, he has a focus on international law and international criminal justice. So, that said, welcome to the program. I think overnight with this deliberate bombing of a refugee camp, the largest in Gaza, it does focus the mind as to what happens next and where this is all going. So perhaps this isn't a simple answer to my question, but is that a war crime?
Laura, that's the question that is being asked today. And I'm not going to please your audience very much with my answer, because I'm going to say it depends. First, it has to be recognized that this is actually a combat situation. Secondly, under the laws of war and international humanitarian law, Israel has a right to confront Hamas, to fight Hamas, to combat Hamas, but it has to follow very strict rules in doing so. And the question is, was this particular strike on the refugee camp, which we've seen, through the lens of the cameras, it was obviously a massive missile attack or munitions attack on the camp. Was it first aimed at a military objective? Israel claims that it was. Israel also claims that that kind of force of munitions is the kind that one needs in order to crush those tunnels underneath buildings that Hamas has built to defend its fighters and to keep its fighters down there, and has, claimed that that is possibly what has happened now, that tunnel area has collapsed. The problem is we don't know, without the kind of investigation that war crimes investigators take or do, whether the number of civilian deaths in striking the camp in precisely the way that it was struck was disproportionate to the military objective that was achieved. Now, I know that sounds kind of technical, and it doesn't sound as if I'm taking humanity into account. But those rules are there during a combat situation. If this were not a combat situation, it would be a different calculus entirely.
Yeah.
But it is. And so I think we'll just have to wait to see in the end of, not only with this strike, but remember, there have been hundreds of Israeli airstrikes, and there will be an analysis someday of how each and every one of those strikes met the conditions of international law. So there's a huge test ahead. We already have seen blatantly what Hamas did on October 7th. But for these actions by the Israeli Defense Force, it can get pretty technical, despite the kind of apparent horror that one sees on the screens.
Yeah. Look, I welcome the nuance, David. I really do. In times like this, we all want black and white answers, because it helps make sense of things, but we can't have that right now. But when you take the humanity into it, which we need to do, there seems to be, a PR battle and a battle on the ground. And what happens with all of these past intifadas or wars with Hamas, and this is a very different one, Israel does start to lose because they are a stronger power, they have the military might, and then the question of collective punishment comes in. What is your view on collective punishment at the moment, given the technicalities you've just explained to us?
Well, I do think that Israel has to calculate the perception of what it's doing versus perhaps the reality of what it's doing. In other words, the whole issue of military objectives is always there technically for the Israeli Defense Force to rationalize.
Yeah, that's right.
But it's also true that Israel could kind of lose the larger war of public opinion and of moving the Palestinian people, Gaza, to a new day someday of peace and of coexistence with the state of Israel. The issue that, frankly, lawyers can't really answer is how does Israel achieve the objective of literally eliminating Hamas from the equation and at the same time sustain the livelihood, the urban character of Gaza? It's an extremely difficult calculus. And of course, it also comes down to just how you execute military strategy. I sometimes wonder, all of us kind of become armchair generals in how we assume these forces should conduct themselves, as opposed to being the military strategists that are actually in the field and in headquarters trying to determine how do you defeat the enemy in a combat situation. But I do think, Laura, your point is absolutely on the mark. Israel has to be extremely careful not to lose the larger objective, which is ultimately its people and the Palestinian people have to learn, I hope in a two-state situation, to live side by side. And these kinds of actions can have the effect of undermining that.
Indeed, David, an illuminating conversation. I wish we had more time. We'll do it again soon. Thanks so much. Keep in touch.